Welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar on the Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Program, also known as 2501 Program. Funding Opportunity Announcement. Before we begin, please ensure that you have access to chat panel by using the associated icon located at the bottom right corner of your screen. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. To submit a written question, please select all panelists from the drop-down menu, type your message in the message box provided, and hit enter on your keyboard when you are ready to send. To ask a question verbally, please hit the raise hand icon, and when your line is unmuted, you will hear a double beep. With that, I'll turn the call over to Kenya Nichols. Kenya, please go ahead.
We can't hear you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Can I get a yes in the chat if you can hear me? Thank you. Great. Well, again, welcome everyone to today's 2501 teleconference. This is our session that's dedicated to helping you all with any clarifying questions you may need on the funding opportunity announcement. We will host 2 of these sessions. The next one will be August the 10th, same time, same place. And we understand that it may be a little tight of a time frame for you to apply for this funding opportunity, but this is just our way of making sure that we provide excellent customer service to you. These were some issues that we were facing within the department of getting the funding out in light of the additional COVID funds. And so we have to make sure that we pay attention to you all and guide you as much as we can. So again, this teleconference is for you. We welcome you. And if you'd like, we will be recording the session and we can provide it to you for future reference. But until then, we'll go ahead and get started. I have our very capable and witty, very nice Sherry Lesh that will lead today's session. And we'll just be tag teaming along the way. And there again will be a Q&A session for any clarifying questions. So without further ado, Sherry, go right ahead.
Thank you, Kenya. I don't know how witty I am, but my name is Sherry Lesh. I am a grants management specialist working in the 2501 program under our director, Kenya Nicholas. So welcome to our teleconference today. We're going to go over a series of slides. We'll try to do it quickly so that we can answer as many questions as possible. As most of you probably know, the short title for our program is 2501 Program because the long title is a mouthful, Outreach and Assistance for Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers. The basics of the 2501 program, we were authorized under the Food and Agriculture Conservation and Trade Act of 1990. Our statutory authority is 7 U.S.C. 2279, which allows for the funding for our type of project, which is specifically outreach and technical assistance for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers and veterans. This is a competitive grant program, so every application we receive competes against all other applications that we receive. The projects that you should be proposing should address outreach, education, mentoring, and technical assistance for our socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers and ranchers. From here on out, I will refer to those groups as SDVFRs because it's a quicker way to get it out. Our overall goal for the 2501 program is to increase awareness and access of all USDA programs and services. We're hoping that your project allows our farmers and ranchers to either begin farming operations, expand their farming operations, or successfully sustains them. The definition of socially disadvantaged in USDA is different for several programs. Our specific definition for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers is a race-based definition. It identifies groups that have historically been subject to racial or ethnic prejudice. So for the 2501 program, the groups that you should be focusing on assisting are African American farmers and ranchers, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian or Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics. And the reason we're pointing this out is because under other USDA programs, women are considered socially disadvantaged, but in our program, they are not. If they fall into one of these groups previously named, then of course they are considered socially disadvantaged, and or if they happen to be veterans also. But women as a group by itself under the 2501 program are not considered socially disadvantaged. The definition of a veteran farmer or rancher is a person who served in the active duty military. It includes all the services within the U.S. military, and those individuals had to have been discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. So our funding opportunity announcement is posted both in the Federal Register and on grants.gov. In order to be able to search for it in grants.gov, in the search bar, you can just type in OPPE-016. Be sure that, you know, that 016, that's a 0, not the letter O. Just pointing that out because sometimes a funding opportunity won't come up unless you type it exactly correctly. Our assistance listing number is 10.443. You can also search for this new funding opportunity under that number. All of your proposals must be submitted through grants.gov. We don't accept them any other way. All of your proposals should be submitted not later than midnight or 11:59 Eastern Time on the 25th of August. I want to caution you, we do not run that grants.gov website that is hosted by another federal agency. If you have problems submitting and you waited until 11:45 and your application doesn't reach us until, you know, a minute after midnight, it will be considered late. I urge you to not wait that late in order to submit your proposals. Ideally, you would do it at the very latest that morning or early afternoon to ensure that your application reaches us in time. That proposal deadline is you know, not, we can't change it. So please submit your proposal on time. Anyone who has disabilities and needs additional assistance, we ask you to please call USDA's Target Center. The number is there. It's 202-720-2600 if you need assistance. Eligible entities. Every applicant for our program must have at least 3 years of experience working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers preceding the submission of this application. So if you only have 2 years working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, you're not eligible. You must have the full 3 years. Institutions of higher education, nonprofit or community-based organizations, and tribal entities are eligible entities. The Secretary does give priority to non-governmental and community-based organizations. Within the score sheet, there will be extra points allocated to those types of organizations. Individuals and for-profit organizations are not eligible to apply for the 2501 program. As previously mentioned, the eligible entities, we've broken them down into categories for you. Eligible entities include in Category 1, 1890 land-grant universities, 1994 tribal, colleges and universities, Alaska Native colleges, and Hispanic serving institutions. Category 2 includes our nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations, which could be a network or coalition of organizations working together, although one organization within that network or within that coalition will be considered the prime or the lead applicant. Also in Category 2 are federally recognized Indian tribes. Category 3 is all other institutions that have institutions of higher education that have an agricultural program. That includes 1862 colleges, nonprofit organizations that don't have their 501c3 certificate from the IRS yet will also fall into Category 3. Keep in mind that you still have to have that 3 years of experience working with SDVFRs. And so if you don't have your 501c3 certificate, your articles of incorporation will have to show how long you've been working with SDVFRs if you happen to fall into Category 3. Ineligible applicants are current 2501 grantees that have a period of performance that extends beyond 90 days of the current fiscal year are not eligible to apply. Applicants that submit incomplete or partial application materials will not be eligible for consideration, and applicants that exceed the maximum amount of allowable pages for both the project narrative and the budget narrative. If an applicant exceeds the maximum federal budget request, your application will not be reviewed or considered. And if you propose objectives that don't fit the scope of the 2501 program, and we will cover that in the next couple of slides, what that is. For fiscal year 2021, the total funding amount is $16.6 million, which was provided in the 2018 Farm Bill. I know many of you will probably have questions about the COVID funding that we had also expected to get out during this funding cycle, but we will answer those questions during the question period. We will not be using the COVID stimulus funding for this particular funding opportunity. Your project period for your proposal must be 3 years. The maximum amount that you can request is $750,000 over a 3-year period, and you may not spend more than $250,000 per year. Only one proposal will be accepted from each organization. However, we have a couple of states, Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, for example, their structure is set up in terms of nonprofit organizations in that they must go through a single fiscal sponsor. In those cases, we will accept more than one application from a fiscal sponsor, as long as they can verify that each project is separate and independent and will be carried out by a single nonprofit organization. The programmatic mission areas for 2501 essentially are the same as they have been for many years. We would like you to address at least 2 of these 5 areas in your application. You can address more than 2, of course. If you can address all 5, that's wonderful. We instruct our panel members that just because you may address all 5, that doesn't mean that you get additional points over organizations that only address 2. Very quickly, those 5 programmatic mission areas include assisting SDVFRs or beginning farmers in owning and operating farms and ranches. We'd like you to assist them in participating in USDA programs and services. We would like you to work toward building relationships between them and USDA's local, state, and national offices. We would like you to assist socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers and forest landowners in a linguistically appropriate manner. And the last one is we would like you to assist with identifying problems and barriers that our SDVFRs face in participating in USDA programs and services. The required forms for your package, it looks like there's a lot, but it gives us the information that we need to help you successfully carry out your project should you be selected. So these are all the required forms. When you go into grants.gov, you will see which are the required forms and which are not. Most of them are all required. In this case, you can see the list here. The only form that's not required is an additional attachments form, and we'll go over that in a few minutes. The SF424 is the application for federal assistance. I would like to point out that on this form, it asks you for the full amount of your request. Be very careful when you fill this out because your project is for a period of 3 years, so the amount that you put on there should not be just for the 1 year or the 2 years of your project. It will be for the full amount for over the 3-year period. Project performance site location, mandatory form. Your project abstract summary is a mandatory form, although you will not receive points for that form. Generally, we use this form if you're selected. We use it for press releases or to provide information on your project for Congress or other entities that may be asking what type of project you'll be conducting. The project narrative is a form that you create. You can create a Word document. Please turn it into a PDF. But on grants.gov, there'll be a form where you have a mandatory area where you attach your project narrative. The SF424A is the budget information for your project, and then the budget narrative, like the project narrative, is a form that you create. You turn it into a PDF, and you will be attaching it to a mandatory budget narrative form in grants.gov. Your budget should include all of your subawardees, their roles and responsibilities, and their budget. You are limited to a maximum of 3 subawardees, and you as a lead or prime awardee, if you're selected, should retain at least 50% of the award. Key contacts. I want to urge you to not only give us whoever your project manager or project director is. At the bottom of this form, there's a little button that says next page. Please provide at least the project manager and a financial person. Ideally, you would have 2 to 3 individuals. So that form, you give us all the information on one individual, click next page, and give us all the information on the second individual, click next page, give us all the information on the third individual. Oftentimes we get one page of your key contacts, and then that person becomes difficult to contact, and we have nowhere else to go. There's nobody else to contact because that's the only name we were given. You will need to fill out your grants.gov lobbying form as well. Those are your mandatory or required forms. The attachment form is where you will place all of your appendices, and appendices will include your resumes, your letters of partnership, your letters of intent, articles of incorporation, any other supporting documents. We ask you, please do not password protect any of your documents. If you password protect them, we and the panel will not be able to review your documents. I would like to make a couple of stronger points here. When you give us your project narrative and you talk about the individuals in your organization that will be, conducting the work, the resume helps to back up the qualifications of that individual. Please send us your resumes. Please don't leave them out of your package. Resumes are so important. The articles of incorporation. If you are a nonprofit organization, you must send in those articles of incorporation. That's how we determine whether or not you've been serving SDVFRs for a period of at least 3 years. Other supporting documents, we will accept other supporting documents if you feel that those documents support your application. But we do not want organizational documents that are hundreds of pages long. You know, we don't want curriculum, that sort of thing. When we're downloading from grants.gov, those gigantic documents cause problems, and sometimes we are not able to download properly all of the documents in your application. So only send in what we're requesting. Cost sharing or matching is not required in the 2501 program. The indirect cost rate cannot exceed 10%. The indirect cost rate is based on the 10% de minimis rate and is applied to modified total direct cost. And I'm going to say that again, that the 10% indirect cost rate is the limit for your project, and it is applied to the modified total direct cost. What that means is that all your direct costs are your salaries and wages, your applicable fringe benefits, materials and supplies, services, travel, and up to the first $25,000 of each subaward. If you'd like to look at the definition of this, you can find it in 2 CFR 200.1. The modified total direct cost excludes equipment, rental costs, participant support costs, and the portion of each subaward in excess of the $25,000. So we will be looking at your budgets closely to see that you have adhered to this. So you may charge your negotiated indirect cost or 10%, whichever is lower. So in other words, if you have a NICRA agreement that's for 8%, that's what you must charge. Unallowable expenses. You will not be able to use funds from the 2501 grant for planning, repair, rehabilitation, acquisition or construction of a building or facility. You can't use these funds to buy large semi-tractors or refrigeration systems or vehicles of any kind. You cannot use 2501 funds to start up or finance businesses. And you cannot use 2501 funds for capacity building. And that is for your organization. It's defined as development of your competencies, strategies, systems, or structures in order to prove your organizational effectiveness and efficiency. Funds may also not be used as agricultural loans or grants for individual farmers. We have programs in USDA under the Farm Service Agency that provides loans and grants for farmers. As a 2501 grantee, should you be selected, you should be introducing those individual farmers to USDA to apply for those loans and grants that they need to, begin or expand their operations. Funds also may not be used to incentivize individuals to attend an event. You may pay individual farmers a stipend, which would be considered participant support costs. That is allowable, but participant support costs entail travel allowances, registration fees, or a small stipend for food if they have traveled a long distance for their conference or workshop or event. We try very hard to hold an annual project directors meeting. In this year, FY 2021, the amount that you can spend to attend the project directors annual meeting has been increased to $1,800 per award year. So, if you have a 3-year award, you can spend $1,800 per year. Please be sure to include that expense in your proposed budget. When you are considering your project narrative, addressing outputs is very important. The term output means outreach, educational component, or assistance activity, or task, or associated work project that you will be conducting. Examples include serving 300 SDVFRs by the end of your period of award, or assisting 100 SDVFRs to be able to process SNAP payments. Another example is conducting title resolution consultations for 10 SDVFRs and hopefully resolution of those plans. Outcomes or results are also should be a focus in your project narrative. Outcomes mean the difference or effect that has occurred as a result from carrying out your project activities. Some examples include documenting the number of SDVFRs applying for USDA programs and services, and another example, documenting the number of SDVFRs that were approved for funding of USDA programs. Project performance measures. These measures are tied to the goals and objectives of each activity that you propose to carry out. Outcomes must be quantitative as it relates to your goals and objectives. An example is what are the measurable short-term and long-term goals your project will have when serving the needs of stakeholders. Will they develop business acumen or implement or incorporate what they've learned? So be sure to include outputs, outcomes, and performance measures in your project narrative. Should you be selected, the type of award that you will receive is a grant. Our involvement in your grant includes we approve your project narrative, or another word for project narrative, or another term for project narrative, a statement of work, and your budget narrative. We will also conduct monitoring throughout your performance or your period of award through semi-annual and final performance reports and financial reports. We also conduct on-site monitoring visits. So that's the level of federal involvement. It's, you know, you carry out your project as you see fit in terms of what was approved when you were awarded the grant. And then we will monitor your performance throughout the life of the grant. In terms of the review process, when we receive your application, the first thing we do is vet both the key personnel and the organization through SAM.gov, which is the System for Award Management. We will also vet you through FAPIS. FAPIS is the website where information, if you have been a previous awardee of a federal grant, that information would be there. Applicants must have the financial, legal, administrative, operational capacity to carry out the objectives of this award. You must have 3 years of experience in providing agriculturally related education, training, or services to SDVFRs. Each application is reviewed by at least 2 panel reviewers. Your application is scored. If there is a large disparity between the scores that the 2 reviewers give to each application, a third or tertiary review may be conducted to arrive at a final score. For scoring criteria, we have a diverse external peer review panel. Each member of the panel, many of them are, you know, members of your peer group. They are also past grantees themselves or current grantees that are not applying during this funding cycle. They will rate your proposal for nonprofit organizations and score them appropriately. Nonprofit organizations can earn up to 105 points. There are 70 points total with an additional 35 priority points for the Secretary's priorities. All other higher education institutions will receive a total of 100 points, 70 points for the overall application, and then 30 discretionary points for the Secretary's priorities. We will provide feedback upon request if you should not be selected for funding. We covered the 3 categories of funding. The 3 categories in these next couple of slides cover what category of funding you will be in depending on your organization's type. So in other words, in Category 2, all of these universities and colleges will compete against each other for funding. In Category 2, all of the nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, and federally recognized Indian tribes compete against each other. And then in Category 3, which is the toughest category because fewer organizations or higher education institutions are funded in Category 3. The System for Award Management, or SAM.gov, you must be registered in SAM.gov before you can apply for the 2501 program. You must maintain your registration, and you must update it annually with SAM.gov. So if you haven't done that yet, I would recommend that you go in there and do it as soon as possible. Don't try to do it at the same time that you are submitting your application in grants.gov. Sometimes these processes take some time, so just make sure that your SAM.gov registration is current. I want to point out in SAM.gov, in the past, we had a whole lot of other forms that our applicants had to fill out. For example, you know, being a drug-free workplace. Within SAM.gov, the federal agencies have tried to streamline the application process. So all of those forms are within SAM.gov, and you won't be filling out individual forms. You'll be filling out a questionnaire that covers all of those topics, and it is called the Financial Assistance Representations and Certifications Report. This is the report that you must fill out if you are applying for federal assistance. A word about SAM.gov. Any entity, no matter what kind of entity it is, they must be registered in SAM.gov if they do business with the federal government. So there are other forms that for-profit businesses fill out for their certifications report. This is the one for our program that you must fill out. Financial Assistance Representations and Certifications Report. All entities must have a DUNS number, which is a Data Universal Numbering System number. You can obtain a DUNS number for free. There's no cost. There's a toll-free number that you can use to get a DUNS number, or you can go to the website www.dnb.com for a DUNS number. This is going to change soon, but I don't want to muddy the waters and talk about that just yet. Next year, there will be a new requirement. So, but this year, FY 2021, if you don't already have a DUNS number, you need to obtain one. Grants.gov. This is where you submit your application for the 2501 program. You must register in grants.gov. Your organization must be registered. There is no fee. You submit all your proposals through grants.gov. Again, search for our funding opportunity, OPPE-016, and it should come up. You can download all the forms and the instruction package. I'm going to make this important point also. Grants.gov is also run by a different federal agency, not USDA. So we can help you with questions that you have about filling out forms and questions about programmatic details and that sort of thing in terms of what we require. But if you have trouble submitting your application, don't call us, call grants.gov. And I say that urgently because if you're at the 11th hour and you don't get a hold of us, you know, we wouldn't be able to help you anyways. It's the grants.gov staff that will help you get your application correctly submitted within grants.gov. To file a complaint of discrimination, the email address is oac@usda.gov, or you can write a letter. The address is there. I believe Kenya said earlier that this was going to be posted on our website, so you will be able to get the address and the fax number if you should feel the need to file a program discrimination complaint. Contact information for the 2501 staff. There's only 3 of us. We feel pretty mighty for just being 3. There's Brenda Wise, there's me, and our wonderful program director, Kenya Nicholas. I don't know what we would do without her, but if you should have programmatic questions, I'm going to give you the email address over the phone number because during the open period for the funding opportunity announcement, we monitor this email box very, very closely, and we try to respond as quickly as possible. That email address is 2501 grants with an S at the end at usda.gov. So that's 2501 grants at usda.gov. So if you have questions or urgently need a response to a budget question that you might have, or any other questions pertaining to our program, please email that email box. We will respond. If you, okay, the grants.gov email address and phone number are also there on this slide. I would recommend that we leave this slide up for a few minutes so that you can copy down this important information while we move on to the question answer period. So, Kenya, I'm passing it over to you.
Thank you, Sherry. We're going to open the floor up for questions. I know Sherry did a very detailed job. Thanks again, Sherry. We don't know what we'd do without you either. So, Ms. Producer, if you would like, please open up the floor for questions and provide instructions on how they can do that. And I've also been going through the chat providing answers to those questions as well. Thank you.
To ask a question verbally, please use the raised hand icon. You will hear a double beep when your line is unmuted. And as a reminder, if you would like to ask a written question, please do so in the chat panel and select all panelists. and hit enter when you're ready to send in your question. We do have someone in the verbal queue that has their hand raised. I will go ahead and unmute them.
Hello, my name is Donnell Richards. I work for a nonprofit in Wisconsin called the Michael Fields Agriculture Institute. I have, I guess, two questions. First, I wanted to get a better understanding of the eligibility criteria that states the 3 years of documented experience. For me, I did hear, for some, you can demonstrate that in the articles of incorporation. So I just wanted to understand if that is the documented or the document that needs to be provided, or what are some other examples of this type of documentation? I'll just ask that question first.
Okay, thank you for your question. I did answer that in the chat for those of you that want to refer to it later. But what happens, there are quite a few different documents that we use. We've used the 501c3 certifications that you receive from IRS. We received your articles of incorporation or any organizational documents that prove you've been in existence for 3 years prior to the date of the application submission date. We've also received letters from previous projects that you all may have worked on in previous years with other departments, different agencies. So it's not one particular type of document, because the 501c3, of course, wouldn't relate to our higher education institutions. So any document that you have to show when you started, and any supporting documented information, we review all of that.
Okay.
Kenya, I would like to add, that 3 years is not just in existence for 3 years, but assisting our SDVFRs for at least 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's very important, because if you've been in existence for 3 years, but you have not been assisting our socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers and ranchers, then that definitely places you in eligibility status, because you wouldn't have the information to show that you have the documented experience to handle the outreach to those socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers and ranchers.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's helpful. I guess the reason why I'm asking is Michael Fields had applied to the 2501 program in previous years and wasn't funded. And so I am seeking to apply, once again, and just making sure that we provide this evidence. To be transparent, I mean, I do work for a primarily white institution or nonprofit. However, we have done a lot of different programmings since we were formed in the 1980s. But the project that comes to mind to provide this type of evidence was actually another USDA grant that was supported by the AFRI program. And we did a lot of outreach and education development with nonprofits and community-based organizations in Milwaukee, Madison, Boston, and a couple other places. So I'm just trying to see if it's just that application that we just submit to support that, or if it's some other document within that application package that needs to be explicitly stating, our relationship at Michael Fields with the socially disadvantaged veteran farmers.
Yes, and certainly any experience with AFRI is definitely beneficial in your application. I know most of the grants, when they're closed, you receive a closure letter. That could be submitted as well. And to address your question about being a predominantly white organization, that is not a qualifier. It's who you serve.
Sure. Okay. Great.
Okay. Well, thanks for your question. Do you have another?
Yeah. I guess, sorry, I'm just trying to write this stuff down. So one moment. Sorry.
And we're going to be recording the session as well, so you can refer to some of this information down the line.
Oh, great. Awesome. So my second question more so touches on the restriction for the sub-awardees. I have a number of partners who I have been working with for a number of years now. And for me, I wanted to kind of understand which ones would make sense to meet, I guess, some of the criteria for it. Well, most of them are farmers, and they do a lot of programming focused around startup farming operations and intentionally growing Black and Indigenous crops, or at least introducing those cropping systems here into Wisconsin. I don't necessarily think they have like the time to step away from those time-intensive like programming aspects. However, I would like to see if they would be able to host something like demonstration sites for specific applications to kind of help newer beginning socially disadvantaged farmers, especially in the urban settings, to understand, here's examples of how you do this. So while I have some of those partners in mind, I understand that I can only do subcontracts with a maximum of 3, and just wanted to better understand, one, if those activities are allowed. Do I set it up as a contract, or can it be designed in a different area to, I guess, still support, the time and resources that those partners are willing to invest to provide that type of education?
Okay, so for sub-awardees, these are entities or contracts that you are, and I don't want to say contracts, sub-awardees, they are carrying out the duties that you have described in your statement of work. Those are where we have a limitation of 3 sub-awardees, because we don't want to provide the funding to your organization and then you just contract all of the work out. We want you all to have at least 50% of those funds remain with the organization. Now, when it comes to contractors, there is no limit on contractors.
Okay.
Because contractors support the work that you're doing. And Sherry,
Yes.
Did you want to add something there?
I do. You as the lead or the prime applicant, you establish the relationships that you have, and you create a sub-awardee relationship with organizations that have a stake in the game. They have to report to you, either quarterly or semi-annually, and you hold them accountable as we hold you accountable for them carrying out specific activities within the project. A contractor is, somebody that you hire to come and give us a talk about irrigation practices, that you pay him and he goes away, and maybe next time you'll pay him to come and do it again, but he really doesn't care whether or not, the farmer, he probably does care that the farmer is successful, but, you've paid him and he goes away. The sub-awardee relationship, they very much want to ensure that the farmer and rancher is successful in whatever activities that they have provided to help that farmer or rancher.
Sure.
So hopefully that is clear, more clear between subawardees and subcontractors. You know, those are different relationships that you as an entity have with, you know, a subcontractor. Are, you know, they provide services and products that you use.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that is very helpful, and I guess that kind of helps me separate, you know, subawardees versus subcontractors. In my mind, I'm thinking some of the farmers who I would like to work with would be more in the subcontractor category. Whereas, for instance, we do a lot of grants advising at Michael Fields, but grant writing is often what is actually needed by a lot of the socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers that we work with. And so we wanted to also provide what I would assume coming out of this conversation, a sub-awardee relationship with our entity who would be willing to provide grant writing services for the grant or for this proposal. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to apply the first time, is because we recognized the need for actual grant writing for a lot of the farmers we work with. And so this proposal that we want to submit again will continue that type of service, enhance some of the grants advising that we do. But for me, what's most important is to show people by example. And by doing that, being able to have subcontracts with farmers who are doing it, but may be doing different types of operations, just so that folks can understand, you know, the available I guess, production systems that they can do as they start or expand their farming operation.
Yeah, so. Demonstration activities are allowable. But again, you establish the relationship that you have with either your subawardees or your subcontractors. You know, you determine that relationship. We do not.
Okay. Sure thing. All right. Well, that's helpful. I don't believe I have any other questions at this time, so I will take the mic away from me. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
We do have another question.
Yes. Is it my turn, Gregory Goins?
Yes.
Good. Can you hear me well? Good. I can see the little mute thing moving around. You know, I'm a professor at a large 1890 HBCU land grant. And so my very first question is there a concrete definition of what socially disadvantaged? Of course, we know what a farmer or rancher is, but, you know, as we write this, you know, there's the, you know, the vulnerable populations and special needs that are in this enterprise. And I just want to make sure that we are inclusive, but I need to see the definition, and I'm sure it's somewhere. Socially disadvantaged, you know, exactly what it is.
Thank you for that question.
We covered that, and sorry. I'm going back to hopefully you're still able to see the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Because we on this slide right here, it specifically tells you what the 2501 program definition is of socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers.
Okay, so this is the concrete right here. I got you. So it's a racial thing. Okay.
This is the concrete for our program, you know.
Right, I got you.
As mentioned earlier. Okay, because USDA has other terms where they define socially disadvantaged, and in some of those definitions, women in general are included.
Got you. Very good. Thank you for that. I'm trying to get my
You're
camera
welcome.
here so I can take a picture of this slide right quick. Okay, I got it now.
I'll just leave it up there for
Okay.
a second.
Thank you. You all are great. And secondly, your examples of outcomes and activities was a little bit intimidating. 300 socially disadvantaged farmers in these very groups right here. That I just worry scope and scale. I'm very familiar with writing proposals, are very competitive, but I just realized that just to be serious about this, 300 African American or Asian I mean, so I'm just trying to I'm talking out loud, but I'm just worried about that type of scale. Seems kind of large if you're going to talk about socially disadvantaged farmers. Do you want to weigh in on that? Or?
We have all kinds of nonprofit and higher education institutions that apply. Some of them are national nonprofits, and so they really can reach 300 socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers or veterans, and some can only reach 25 or 50 or over a period of 3 years. Obviously we want you to try to reach as many as possible.
Right.
Your application will not be graded on the numbers that you can reach. You, in your project narrative, you will establish the need for the area or the region that you want to serve. And as long as you establish that need, if it's 30 farmers and ranchers, then it's 30, but that's 30 more than we probably had before. And so that's always good,
Okay, very good. And as you can tell, I spent my life work in this genre. That's why when I saw those numbers, I was like, that's interesting. Okay. And then lastly, I realized that the word youth is involved in the, one of the secretary's priorities. And I don't know if this is a comment or a question. I don't know. But to grow this endeavor, we got to involve the youth because, and so I'm glad that was put in there. And but not to overplay the youth, but the beginning farmers, and I hope the other competitors will, especially if we talk about the minorities. I hope that's a focal point because we're trying to grow the pie rather than just embellish what we already have because it's dwindling, as you all know. So I was glad to see that the word youth is used once in the FOA.
Yes, and thank you for that acknowledgement because we also have youth programs at USDA where they're able to receive forgivable loans. So, outreach to our programs includes those youth loans. So thank you for that acknowledgement. And
thank you. And is that Miss Nicholas talking?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I'm such a Zoomer. I'm used to a box being around your name or something. So I'm trying, but anyway, thank you. And then one last question. I'm struggling a bit because at my university, we work with a lot of nonprofits in this area. And so we can write a grant together or we can write it separate because our main thrust is a little different for the nonprofit versus the university. And so, again, I don't really have I'm struggling in my mind. Should we write separate proposals or we should do it together? And I'm still struggling with that. And so anyway, that's not really a question. Go ahead.
Well, but here's a comment that might be helpful.
Yes.
You are allowed to be both a prime applicant and be awarded, and you can also be a sub-awardee of another organization that gets awarded.
Right.
As long as you're not performing or conducting the same activities for one award as you are for the other award.
Right. Well,
we encourage partnership and collaboration with universities and nonprofits in your region because the likelihood of being able to reach a greater number of farmers and ranchers, is high. And,
Right.
So we encourage that.
Well, that's just great.
As long as you don't mix.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, is that Miss Lesh?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get, good. Yeah, thank you. Well, that's a major relief what you just said, because we won't even ask for any money. We'll just collaborate, as we are. So that's great. So even up to the level of a sub-awardee, but I doubt we'll get that level. So that's just good. I was just afraid of our name appearing as a prime and appearing in another grant. So that's great. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm
We love to see that partnership too.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah, okay, formally. Yes, thank you.
Yes, it warms our heart.
Thank you, Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, we do have another question.
Hello, it's Kieran Simmons, and I work with socially disadvantaged veterans and farmers. And we were doing research before we actually created an entity, but it's been 3 years of us actually doing the work. We do have documentation on that. And so my question is, if by the time we submit the application, it may not have been quite 3 years, but by the time the program actually begins, it would have been 3 years. Would that count at all if we have been actually doing the work?
So, you can determine that the project, should you be selected, will begin on 1 October. However, the funding opportunity announcement states that prior to applying for this award, you have to have that 3 years experience working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. So if you don't meet that criteria, then you would not be eligible this year. If you will have that 3 years experience prior to the 25th of August, then you're eligible.
Okay, and another quick question. So we are working with like a land grant school, and they apply, and we're like one of the partners in that. Could we be a sub-awardee?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And so you were saying about like a fiscal agent being able to connect to different programs. Does that apply as well if the land grant?
No.
Okay.
No. The fiscal agent, both in the states of Massachusetts and Pennsylvania, they have a funny way of setting up their nonprofits. And so a nonprofit in those states don't have like DUNS numbers and federal ID numbers, and it's just the way the state itself, the state laws have organized the nonprofits that work within their state. So a nonprofit within their state goes to a fiscal agent that acts on behalf of, they perform, all the administrative duties and requirements for all of the nonprofits in that state.
Okay.
And so, that fiscal agent actually applies, but it's the nonprofit in that state that actually carries out the work. It's a couple of states are just the way they're set up. Okay.
I understand the fiscal agent and what that means. I was just trying to see if, because it's the land grant school, if that was a way for them to, because like most of the participants are even asking, a lot of our issues are around documentation and record keeping. And so because of that, is there a way to even access these funds? So, even if you have been doing it on a small scale, to do it on a larger scale for the next 2 to 3 years, is that, there's just no way possible, basically. And so just until they actually have documentation, it may take another 3 years in addition to what they spent if they didn't have, proper documentation. So I don't know if there is a way, maybe with attendance sheets or something, not trying to get around requirements because we do need to be compliant, but just, that sort of thing. Okay.
If you've been like a sub-awardee or a subcontractor for a university, and the university can like maybe give you a letter that says that you have been working with them, or on their behalf working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers or veterans for a period of 3 years, that would be considered.
Okay. Thank you.
We do have other questions.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for this funding opportunity and the time to provide clear information and answer our questions. Our organization currently has 2 programs to train and serve socially disadvantaged farmers, one that started in 2011 and the other that started in 2019. And I'm just wondering if this funding can be used for both of those programs or only for the program that has the over 3 years of experience, or to even start a new one in a new community.
It's not a program that has to have those 3 years experience. It's the organization that needs to have that experience.
Awesome. And so our organization is a national nonprofit. So that probably answers this next question. We're a national nonprofit with several different programs across the country. So we would apply as our national nonprofit, correct?
As long as you are an organization that has been assisting socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers or veterans for at least 3 years prior to your application.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we do have other questions.
Hi there. I was hoping you could provide a little more information on the distinction between incentive payments and participant support costs. And I'll give a little framing that we're looking at, addressing barriers to involvement, so the number of the areas of work, problems and barriers identified entities. So if we're going to be interviewing socially disadvantaged folks in the agricultural system, would like to make sure they're compensated for that time, how that can be framed as participant support costs as opposed to incentive costs. If we're paying them not just to get there for their gas, but actually, the hour of time that it takes to sit in the room and talk to us. Is that clear?
Yes, participant support costs are allowable, and it's basically to provide the supplies and maybe travel if they're doing like a curriculum or program, and that is an allowable cost. And I'm sorry, the other part of your question versus the support cost?
Yeah, so can we pay them a certain, like $20 in cash for giving us an hour of their time to sit with us and talk about their barriers to entering the ag system? Seen as an incentive payment.
That gets a little hairy because we do not provide grant funds to give incentives to attend. We provide the grant funds for you all to provide those services for free. So any incentives to attend would have to come from that organization.
Okay. So paying people for their time as we interview them about barriers to entering systems is seen as an incentive.
That kind of gets into if you're paying them for their feedback, you may want to do like a focus group or something like that, and then maybe you can have them come in as subject matter experts, and maybe pay them as consultants.
Okay. All right.
Sherry, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Said it well.
Yeah, we just have to be careful. Yeah, we have to be careful because we got into a situation where, you know, you're saying $10 or $20, but then there's some other people say, well, we're going to give them a free laptop. So, you know, we aren't able to incentivize. We're already providing the services for free. So any additional incentives would have to come from that organization.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to be respectful of the time people were working with.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And maybe in the chat, maybe you could say over voice, I've asked for a little clarification on what are considered USDA programs to meet the mission area number 1 and number 2. And have just been directed in the chat to the very basic homepage of USDA.gov. Is there anywhere within that initial landing page that you could more specifically direct to?
I'm sorry, you were looking for a list of our programs and services?
Okay, so sorry, let me reframe. So mission area number 2 here says improve participation in USDA programs.
Oh, yeah.
For more specifics on what is included in quote unquote USDA programs.
Well,
and, yeah.
Yeah, and we cannot tell you all what to do. Some organizations have specialized experience in maybe conservation, may have one in row crops. So wherever the expertise that you have, goes back to that 3-year experience. So any of the programs that we have, it's over maybe 150 different programs that you all could assist in bringing awareness to or assisting, you know, your participants in applying to. So we don't dictate them, but there are lists of programs based on the mission area. So whatever your specialization is or where you have experience in working, I would strongly suggest there. But to say, you know, this is one list of programs that you can choose from, the website unfortunately doesn't list them all separately. What I can do is see if I can enter one that's more specific, but they are listed by mission areas. So that's why that generic USDA page is there. If you're looking for conservation, you can go into the search box and just type conservation programs, and then they'll all come up there for your viewing as an example.
Okay. Maybe more pointedly, I can go ahead.
I just wanted to add too, you know, for example, you know, we have Farm Service Agency, Rural Development, NRCS offices scattered throughout all of the counties throughout the U.S. And a lot of our farmers and ranchers don't know that. You know, they don't know that they can go down to their local farm service agency and ask for a microloan or an operating loan. You know, so you know, you as a grantee hopefully have expertise in all of the USDA programs that are available to our farmers and ranchers, and you facilitate an introduction between them. You know, you go to your local farm service agency county office and you say, hey, I'd like to have a workshop, for example, and hold a workshop on how to fill out a loan application for USDA programs. You know, that helps to improve our farmers and ranchers' participation in USDA programs where they may not have known any, ever existed.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just ask pointedly. So I work for a cooperative extension program, which is partly funded by USDA, but do you have any feedback on whether that would be considered a USDA program?
I'm sorry, which program is this again to be considered USDA?
So the University of California Cooperative Extension System.
And you were wondering if they're considered as a program or as an eligible entity?
Well, because we're in part funded by USDA, but so does that make us a USDA program or not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. That was my last. Thank you for all your time and feedback.
Thank you for your participation.
And we have one last question.
Sorry, this is Donnell again from Michael Fields. There was a point in the presentation, and I think it was kind of mentioned here, but we were, encouraged to kind of talk to previous 2501 applicants or awardees. And so I have spoken to some, just in different parts of the regions, and I just wanted to know if they have been funded or are currently funded by 2501. Are they allowed to be a sub-awardee or a subcontractor in this grant cycle?
Yes,
I'm thinking,
as long as they're not
as an advisor, or again, to kind of offer additional insight for our approach.
The quick answer to that is yes, you can, as long as you're not creating a duplicative effort. You're not doing the same exact thing.
Sure. Great.
Yeah, we want to avoid the double dipping scenario.
Totally. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually, have one more question. Do we have time for another?
Yes, we do. Go right ahead.
Thank you. My question is around the 3-year requirement. If an organization, let's say, has worked with veterans to explore avenues in agriculture and improve their farm businesses for a time period of 6 years, may we include in our proposal to extend that same type of work to other socially disadvantaged groups if we have not yet worked with them for a full 3 years? Or do we have to restrict our proposal to working with veterans?
No, we want you to reach as many veterans and socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers as possible. If you've already been working with veterans in an agricultural manner for the past 3 years, absolutely expand it to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers as well. We were just trying to clarify that you can work with either veterans or socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, or both. You're not penalized for only working with one group over another, but certainly throw the doors wide open to work with both. If you have experience already working with one, and you've been doing that for a period of 3 years, but by all means, start helping the socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
That concludes our verbal questions.
Well, I'd like to answer some questions that are in the chat. I was trying to answer the questions as well as participate verbally, but some of them I didn't get to. The three proposals, excuse me, the three categories, they have what we call peer competition. So nonprofits will compete with nonprofits. Our land grants and Hispanic serving institutions will compete with their peers. And our third category is our other category, which could be an 1862 university or college or a nonprofit without a 501c3 status. So that is a result of stakeholder feedback, where some universities have what we would call a whole grant writing staff, and then you have a nonprofit that may not have those resources available, but are equally doing a lot of work in the community. So those are the three funding pots that we went over that Sherry has up on the screen now on the slides, and we will be sharing the slides as well. Also, Congress did provide the $17.5 million and additional $2.5. The $16.6 million is the minimum amount that we will be funding after you subtract out of the administrative costs. So it could be more, but certainly not less. The question regarding a resource partner with the Small Business Administration for 5 years, providing services to veterans, but not farmers or ranchers. Excuse me. You would not be able to apply as an individual. However, if you are set up as a nonprofit, you could assist veterans, but it has to be veteran farmers and ranchers. So that would be the dividing line there. The program is for farmers and ranchers that are veterans or socially disadvantaged. However, we do have a military veteran agricultural liaison that is housed here in our office at the Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement. And I will enter his information in the chat. And he is everything veteran for farmers and ranchers, recruiting, apprenticeships, spousal programs, and what have you. So I will enter his name here in the chat. His name is Bill Ashton, and I'll enter his email as well. You have another question here about when the COVID funding will be released. The department has not yet made a final decision on funding for the COVID $37.5 million yet. As soon as they do, we will get those funding straight onto grants.gov and the Federal Register. There's a question about a nonprofit with USDA's NIFA food project that's ending. And the question is, are you eligible to apply? Absolutely, as long as you're not creating a scenario where there's a duplication of effort. We do not fund identical projects under separate programs. Kirion Simmons had a question and they weren't sure how to raise their hand, but if you would like, you can unmute your phone or you can just enter that question in the chat.
Yes.
I have already spoken. I figured out how to raise my hand.
Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Great. Refugees are eligible beneficiaries under the program as long as they belong to one of the socially disadvantaged groups, African American, Asian American, Hispanic or Latino, Pacific Islanders, Alaska Natives, Native American. The question about Native Hawaiians considered socially disadvantaged, they are considered socially disadvantaged. Child care costs could be considered, but not as an incentive. There are child care costs that are eligible under our 2 CFR 200 regulations, which govern all federal grants in the event an organization employee is traveling over, I believe, 2 to 3 nights. But child care for expenses of participants, that is something that we need to look a little bit further into. Sherry, did you have any information on that?
I'm sorry, Kenya. I was going through the chats looking for other questions. What was the?
I know, I was doing the same thing throughout to make sure we address everyone's question. But it was about childcare as an incentive for participating in farm programs. I know that we do not provide those as incentives as a whole, but they are available for an organization's personnel for extended time. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I would, like Kenya said, go to the 2 CFR 200, which governs all federal assistance, and read up on that. The criteria is outlined, I think, very well in the 2 CFR 200.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's a question about technical assistance providers who are not employees. Would they be considered contractors? Generally, yes. However, that depends on the organization's discretion to have them labeled or considered and paid as contractors. But if they're not employees, generally they are considered contractors. Again, individuals are ineligible, but if you are interested in working with some of our grantees, some of them that are active are mostly our 2019 and 2010 grantees, because those are multi-year projects that go up to 3 years that are probably still most likely working. I encourage you to reach out to them if you're interested in maybe some contracting opportunities or just to get involved with 2501 as an individual. So that question
and
about...
Also you,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, also you can go to our website and see all of the projects that were previously funded under 2501 and contact information for that project manager.
Yes, and that link is in the chat. For-profit entities participating as a contractor or sub-awardee. I have not seen any sub-awardees that are for-profit because the sub-awardees, as Sherry mentioned earlier, they act as grantees where they have to report. They are in the SAMs. They report on USA spending. So they are acting in the role of a grantee, which is a not-for-profit or higher education institution. For-profit entities are not eligible, but they can be considered a contractor. Nonprofits can include churches. It depends on how they are set up. There was a question about churches being nonprofits. If they're 501c3s, they would participate under our nonprofit category 2. If they are not 501c3s, they would participate under our other category, and they must be involved in assisting socially disadvantaged or veteran farmers and ranchers and have the 3-year experience that we spoke about earlier.
Somebody wanted to see the outcome slide again. I'm going to try to get to it.
Also, the SFAC, which is our State Food and Agriculture Council, and they are basically the leaders from our 3 major field agencies, with Farm Service Agency, NRCS, and FSA. A letter from the SFAC is not required. However, if you have one, you may include it in your package. It is a plus in your package, but is not awarded points. There are no points assigned for any support letters, whether they're from Congress people or if it's from your local USDA officials. If you have a cooperative agreement with NRCS, you are not disqualified. However, you have to make sure that you are not duplicating efforts. I see a lot of questions about, if I'm doing this, can I still do that? I want to remind you all that we encourage you all to layer these USDA funds. We don't want you to depend on one funding source, especially one that's competitive, because there could be a scenario where you're not funded. And I've seen agencies or organizations rather have to close their doors. So I want you all to think outside of the box in terms of USDA's programs and services. We have over 150, and I'm sure there are probably at least 5 to 10 that everyone on this line can apply for. So please keep that in the back of your mind when you're applying for USDA's programs and services. As long as there's not a duplication of effort and we're not double dipping funds, we encourage it. There is no advantage or disadvantage for asking for the full $250,000 per year. That is an allowance that we have provided for you, so we would not turn around and penalize you for that. Historically, we have reduced funding across the board for all applications, but we certainly would not penalize you for asking for the full $250,000 per year. And the reasoning behind the $250,000 per year and the 3-year grants is because we are wanting to show more of an impact. Historically, we had 1-year projects. So now we have 3-year projects, and that's a lot of time, or at least more time than 1 year, to be able to show the impact and all of the good work that our grantees are doing out in the field. So 1 year is kind of limiting, especially we get the funding in the end of September, and sometimes you have to go out and hire and find the expertise, and you're not really getting started with your project until the beginning of the year. It happens, and we've listened to feedback, and that's one of the reasons why our stakeholders, as well as we have here at USDA, make sure that we could put that back on the table for longer terms. So no penalties there. And I think I addressed all the questions in the chat. If not, you can raise your hand. We will again.
We have 2 more, Kenya.
Okay. I'm not seeing them on my end. If you see them, you can address them. Mm-hmm.
Arnetta, did you want to ask a question?
I'll go ahead and unmute Arnetta.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been typing as fast as I could. we have all the experience. We have the documentation. We've been doing this for a minute. Uh, However, because someone asked earlier about the specific USDA programs. When USDA representatives, either for RD, FSA, NRCA, whoever, whenever they come in, that's where the similarities are duplicated, because they're trying to advise our communities of what is available. Okay, so there is a duplication of effort in that part, but I think that was part of the basic fundamental checkoff list. What I want to know is, when we go beyond that, like we have applicants, our people who attend our meetings, who literally need assistance in their applications, who need to know how to take their gardens and make them from a regular, household hobby to an actual business, so long as they make $1,000 a month, or who can take their product and we bring in people to teach them how to add value to what it is that they do, including our veterans, the whole 9 yards. So do we have to be specific of what our difference is from other organizations? Because we work with the 2501, but our efforts extend beyond what they provide.
And that's a good question.
Sense?
When I say, I'm sorry.
I said, does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. When I say duplication of efforts, we have people that have one proposal and they'll send it all through USDA. And
okay.
Yeah, when I say duplicative effort, I mean doing the exact same thing under another program. So the duplication of effort that you're talking about, that's certainly encouraged.
Okay. Gotcha.
But if you're identical proposals, yes, go ahead, Sharon.
And I just want to add a little bit more clarity, Arnetta. So let's say you have a 2501 grant and you have a NIFA grant, and you hold a workshop on how to fill out a USDA loan application. You cannot say, like on Monday or today, the 28th of July, you can't hold that one workshop and say, well, this meets my activities that I did for 2501 grant and my activity for the NIFA grant. You can hold a workshop today for your 2501 grant and tomorrow for your NIFA grant on loan application. You can't just say that one workshop was for both grants.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So that does raise a question. Oh my gosh, my age is showing up now because it flew out the window. Oh my gosh. Okay. Duns and Sams. I've heard you re-emphasize the point that it doesn't matter the organization, it matters the work. Okay? Right? Is that correct?
For Duns and Sams?
No. Well, I'm getting ready to ask a question about Duns and Sams, but I've heard it stated today that it doesn't matter the organization. What is primary is the work that's being done for at least 3 years, correct?
The organization has to have that 3-year experience.
The organization does. So we have our Duns, we have our Sams. That other thing, that financial whatever, because we've had it for a minute. I don't ever remember doing that. Is that something new?
Articles of incorporation, is that what you're talking about?
No. On the SAMs, that second part, hang on.
Is it certs and representation? Certs and reps? The certification and reps represent, I think you just passed it. That one, financial assistant representation and certifications report?
Yes, that one.
Yes. That is a requirement.
Yeah, in the olden days, you used to have to fill out a bunch of forms that started with the letters AD. And those forms certified that you were a drug-free workplace, that you didn't,
Right. Right.
Do all kinds of stuff, So now you
I
just
remember that.
go into sam.gov. Go ahead.
I just said I remember that.
Okay, so now you don't have to do all of those AD forms. You just go into sam.gov. The federal agencies have streamlined your application process, and you answer a series of questions within sam.gov. And when you finish answering those questions, under the financial assistance representations and certifications area, this report will spit out, and that's what we will look at and print out and put in your official folder.
Okay.
What I was trying to make sure that everybody understood, there are contractors that are paid, that are for profit. They also do business with the federal government, so they fill out a similar form, but it's not this one. So many of our past applicants have filled out that form and not this one. And so I just want to make sure you fill out this one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question. The difference between the incentive and the stipend. So if someone is traveling here and let's see here. The incentive, you can't pay anybody to come and do what they do to participate, but a stipend is allowed. Explain the stipend again.
A stipend,
like a stipend for travel
should cover travel allowances, registration fees, or minimal costs for food for them to attend a conference or a workshop or a training day.
Gotcha.
You can pay them a stipend.
Okay. Thank you so very much. This has been excellent.
Okay. And the food is only $10 per meal, limit of 2 meals for that day.
Okay.
So if they're coming to a demonstration workshop from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., you can only feed them twice, $10 for lunch and $10 for breakfast.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for participating. There's another question in the chat about grants to individual veteran farms. Unfortunately, funds cannot be used to award grants to individual farms. They can be used to pay for work, training, internships, and education, which is what we do. We provide you the funding so you can provide those trainings and internships for free to those veteran farmers. So when you mentioned about a cost share, a position or a salary for a veteran that's ready to farm and be hired by a farm, I'm not ever seeing a scenario where that has been allowable. Only salaries that we pay for are that of the grantee, the organization or the institution. So if he's ready to be farming and he's ready to get started and be hired by a farm, then for us to pay his or her salary as a farmer to work on another farm is not in line with the mission of the program. Organizations that have been established for over 50 years that are serving farms statewide, do we need something that says specifically helping socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers? The answer is yes, you have to have experience working with veterans or socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. If they are not and you just have farming experience, if you've helped veterans in the past, I'm sure if you've been doing it for 50 years, you've helped someone that was socially disadvantaged or had a veteran background. So we'll be open to talking more about that. If you send us an email at our 2501 grants account, I will enter that into the chat again. We'd be happy to talk more about that.
And it looks like Mary Beth Johnstone has a question. I don't know if you can unmute her.
Oh, hi. Thank you all for this very informative webinar today. And I just got a phone call while you were talking the last time, so I hope I'm not going to be repetitive, but I wondered about the question about the 3 years experience working with socially disadvantaged farmers. I know that applies to the prime, but does that also then applies to the subaward, right? That criteria?
I would say no, because the subawardee has their own roles and responsibilities that are defined in that in their proposal. Each of the proposals that we review, you have subawardees, we need to know the roles and responsibilities, and of course they have to have experience in whatever they're doing.
Okay.
Terry, did you want to add to that?
No, I agree with you. I know that the terms and conditions flow down to the subawardee, and you as a lead applicant, hold the subawardee accountable for whatever it is that they are providing for the project. But my brain was sort of going down our terms and conditions, and I don't think subawardees necessarily have to have that 3 years experience, except that I would like to state that, hopefully your partnership with your subawardees includes the same, passion for working with socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers or veterans, or has some means of outreach to those groups.
Okay. And I had one more question. I wondered if your program tracks utilization of USDA programs by minority farmers by state. And if you do, is that data available somewhere on the website?
We are currently reviewing all of our processes, and we would like to get there, and we are working towards that goal.
Okay.
And I'd like to add something there too. We have what we call REG stats. It's REG, race, ethnicity, and gender stats. And we do list that information on program utilization and utilization for our farm-related programs. And I can enter that information into the chat as well. Not sure how dated the information is, but that is something that the department is working to improve. So I will enter that into the chat.
Thank you all, and that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Do we have any other questions?
There are no further verbal questions.
Okay, so I'm entering the RegStats information into the chat now. I encourage any of you to look through that information. It is program utilization by county, by state, and I believe you can kind of can your searches and filter them down to actual race and ethnicity per county. So again, I thank you all for your time. If you have any other questions you would like to have addressed, you can always send them to us. The slide is up at the 2501 grants@usda.gov. I do see one last question about serving populations over the years. We also have all of our grants from 2010 to 2020 listed on our website for the 2501 program, and I listed that site earlier in the chat. It's probably lost in all of the other conversations, but I will enter it again for easy accessibility. And you can go down to funded projects on that page, and in those funded projects by year, we mentioned earlier, I think Sherry mentioned earlier, you can go down to see who's the contact person. There's phone numbers there, there's emails, and you can just have you can review a synopsis of what the project they're undertaking. So with that, if there are no more questions, again, I thank you all for your participation. This webinar is recorded and it will be posted onto our website. And I'm not sure, can you please confirm if this will be sent automatically to the participants, or is this something that we would have to push out? Cisco.
Question, producer?
Yes.
Yeah, you would have to distribute it.
Okay. Okay, so, and we'll get a list of attendees and we can send that out. Again, we will post it on our website, and we'll have another session on August the 10th, 2 o'clock, right here. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.